Welcome to Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live here on Giants.com as well as the mobile app. He's Jonathan Casillas. I'm Lance Medow with you for the next 60 minutes. And multiple ways for you to interact with us here on the program. You give us a ring, 201-939-4513. That is the telephone number. You can hit us up on Twitter as well, hashtag Giants Chat. And as a reminder, you can find the archive of this show and our entire podcast network on the Giants mobile app, podcast platforms everywhere, and at Giants.com/podcast. So this is the first time that Jonathan and I have been on the show since they made the announcement for the initial 53-man roster, so we'll give you some of our thoughts. They also announced 12 members of the practice squad, and no surprise, all 12 players are with the Giants at some point this summer, and that seems to be the movement we've seen by most teams. You want continuity, you want familiarity, but as far as the initial 53, I don't know, and I don't think you would maybe label anything, given you've seen your fair share of transactions over the course of your career, JC, anything too surprising, but two players caught my attention. Number one, the fact that Ryder Anderson didn't make the initial 53. He's going to be on the practice squad. I thought he'd be a candidate, make the initial 53, then get placed on short-term injured reserve, given the injury. And then Darian Beavers, obviously, who was coming off the injury. We know Micah McFadden was ahead of him on the depth chart. Wink Martindale made that very clear. Ultimately, though, he does return to the practice squad as well. And I think with Beavers, it just goes to show you, and this is something you could attest to, coming off a torn ACL, everyone's on a different timeline, JC, in terms of their recovery and how effective they could be that far removed from the injury.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the trade for Isaiah Simmons kind of signified that they needed, or they felt like they needed an upgrade or at least a little bit more strength at that position, that outside linebacker position, opposite Bobby Okereke. And Beavers is a guy, like you talked about just now, he suffered a very serious injury in the ACL, and some people don't come back from that. That's not the case with him so far. We don't know that quite yet, but it's still early. It's been like, a little bit less than a year or about a year?
Yeah, he got hurt in the preseason last year.
So about a year.
Yeah.
And these injuries take at least 12 months, right? So he's right at that number now, but it's good to actually have him out there doing football stuff already.
Sure.
And I think, Micah McFadden's progress with this defense, with this under Wink Martindale, I think he was a step ahead, and then also not missing a year, not having a setback, I think he was a step ahead. But then you bring in a kid like Isaiah Simmons, who's, top 10 pick just a few years ago, who has all the measurables, right? And I think that is what they wanted from probably Beavers, that Beavers probably didn't show them in these limited amount of time and reps that he's had since he's been basically active, right? So I expect him to come along. I think I mentioned this on BBKL a couple weeks ago about him having a setback and coming back from the setback and eventually getting to the player that he once was, or even better, or just a shade under where he used to be at. But at least he's the player that is recovered from an ACL, and that takes a while, not just physically but also mentally as well. So putting him on the practice squad and then allowing him to still stay in the system, still stay in the building, and keep those football reps going in 3-4 weeks, a month, I think he'll be back to where we remember him at last year.
And you never know when opportunity knocks on the door based on injuries or whatever it may be, and that's why he's an asset, because like you said, he's young, there's still potential, and he knows the system. Though the players you brought up with respect to Simmons, Beavers, I'll throw O'Shane Ximenez into the mix, and Tamon Fox. It's an indication based on them bringing in Isaiah Simmons and Carlos Boogie Basham, who they brought in from the Bills, that they were still looking, and this is my opinion, for that third complementary pass rusher in comparison to what they already had on the roster. And JC, you and I have had multiple conversations. You got Kayvon Thibodeau, you got Azeez Ojulari, and both of those guys need to prove they can get through a whole season. But when you look for the teams that are maybe ahead of the rest of the pack, it's that team that has that third and fourth pass rusher. And I'm not talking about a 10-sack guy, but I'm talking about maybe 7-8 sacks, a disruptive force. And based on the moves they made, to me, it's an indication they're looking for ways to maybe fine-tune that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, with Isaiah Simmons, he checks that box, and he also checks the other middle linebacker box
Dual
as well.
threat. Yeah.
And then you bring in Boogie Basham, and he kind of, complements that third pass rusher, probably, role player, rotating in. I don't know about special teams with that guy. He's a big guy. I don't know how he's doing on special teams. But I also think that allowing a guy like that with Boogie coming in here will allow somebody like O'Shane Ximenez to be a feature on special teams. eventually if he gets the nod, right? If he gets the nod to get on an active roster. And that's something that we also spoke about all preseason, right? The Giants need to get better depth so they can have better players on special team and better core on special teams. And I think with these guys, it might help with that. And look, I think Beavers, from what I saw from him last year, remember him in Cincinnati, like the guy can play football. He had a big setback. I expect him in a month to be back to at least a capable comparison to what he used to be before, right? So I expect the guy to actually do something this year, possibly with an injury, possibly not, just because I think he's a pretty good player, and I think he will help this team when he's back to 100% or close to 100% or whatever the case is. But all they did this year, I feel like offseason with the draft, I think they're just bringing in very talented players that can play possibly multiple positions, and then also high character guys, right? And when you bring in guys like that fit into this system, that fit into the locker room, they're going to fit into the system that much easier, and Wink Martindale is not going to have a problem plugging and playing all of these guys because they're talented guys and they're high character guys.
Now, Boogie Basham has no history with Wink Martindale, but he does know Brian Dable and Joe Shane because they were in Buffalo, and he knows several other guys on the team too. So that should help make for a smooth transition with respect to the locker room. And Brian Dable made it clear yesterday he's considered an outside linebacker. So that's the room that Boogie Basham is going to be in, and we know based on what we saw already against the Jets, Isaiah Simmons, they're not going to shy away from giving him the green light to go after the quarterback, even though it was a running back matchup. But still, you could tell that they look at him as a guy that can rush the quarterback. And that goes back to the show we had last week where we were talking about that in terms of where he may fit in. Staying on the defensive side of the ball, a few other things I want to bring to light. 11 defensive backs they retained. And that number is relatively high. When you look at, especially, I always do a comparison on Twitter, 8 was the number of defensive backs they kept. Now, that was the initial 53. Things always change after that. I think that's a product of number of these players that you look on the list, Jonathan, are banged up entering the season. So we don't really know what their status is going to be. Bobby McCain suffered a concussion against the Jets. Nick McLeod has been out. Javarius Owens, 7th-round pick, he got banged up. So you look at least 3 guys I named, I think they say to themselves, let's protect ourselves. And then listen, if we got to put somebody on short-term IR, we do, but at least we're not rolling the dice to lose somebody through the waiver process.
And then also you throw that in there with the 2 unproven rookies that they're going to play week 1 against Dallas as starters on the outside. I think that's all insurance policies that you have, right? A whole bunch of guys, I think they're all capable. I think they've proven Banks and Hawkins. I think they've proven that they can play in this league from the limited amount of snaps that they had in preseason, and then also the practice reps because they've been playing basically first and second corner all preseason, right? Ever since that second week, Hawkins been kind of rotating in. Banks been the guy since he got drafted, right? That's the reason why you draft a corner in the first round to have him play. 6th-round pick Hawkins, he's definitely the surprise out the whole entire room. But with all that being said, they're both still rookies. So you have to be able to have insurance policies on the back end because you just don't know how they're going to play. You don't know how they're going to go because look, Dallas, the reason why I think the Giants are playing 2 rookies is because they have one of your better corners in Adoree Jackson to play inside because that's where CeeDee Lamb lines up. Okay, guys, we know who CeeDee Lamb is. He's a tremendous wide receiver. He plays inside about 60% of the time. You got to have somebody covering him. So I think the Giants are lined up to do and all their off seasons like positioning and their preseason stuff, all that's to play Dallas, to get ready for Dallas. And they're moving into different rotations and alignments with the DBs and the linebackers and all of that to go against the Dallas Cowboys. And the Giants have 2 corners that they're rookies, that's unproven, that's going to suit up for opening weekend. They have no idea how they're going to perform, right?
That's a guessing game at this point a little, sure.
As we all know this, rookies get baptized in this league. Sometimes it happens a little bit later. Sometimes it happens later. Yep. In this case, it's probably going to happen really early, and just we don't know how they're going to respond. So having the guys behind them, like a Darnay Holmes, kind of being that rotational piece in a defensive backside, I think it's good. And that'll give the guys competition. That'll give the guys at least that insurance policy in Wink Martindale, knowing that if these rookies are struggling early, you can plug in a veteran that actually understands how to play this game and how to bounce back in that short-term memory that some people may or may not have at this point.
Yeah, there could be ups and downs. I mean, let's face it, there are expected ups and downs. It's hard to believe a rookie's going to come in, it's going to be smooth sailing. And even though they may be in a better position to defend CeeDee Lamb, Brandon Cooks and Michael Gallup are not chopped liver in terms of who these two rookies are going to go up against, as well as Tony Pollard out of the backfield and some of the tight ends. But clearly, to your point, the volume of the DBs, at least initially on the roster, a product of youth movement as well as injuries. The other thing that was interesting as I was looking over the initial 53-man roster, and I think this says a lot about how far the roster has come and also the approach of the front office. And you've seen this from being around the league with several teams. In the salary cap era, you can't just throw money at the wall and continue to fill your voids through free agency. You got to build a team through the draft.
Yep.
So Joe Schoen has now had 2 draft classes, okay? Of the total players that they've brought in through 2022 and 2023, that was a total of 18 guys. Well, just 1 player from both of those classes combined is not on the 53-man roster, and that's Darian Beavers. That's amazing.
That is amazing.
I mean, that is a high volume of guys. That jumps off the page. All 7 members of the 2023 draft class made the initial 53. 10 of the 11 from 2022. Now, in fairness, JC, some of those guys were hurt, like a Marcus McKeithen. But the bottom line is that they've seen enough potential within 1 year, not even 1 year, a few months of the 2023 class and the 2022 guys. I think that says a lot that the investment they made in these players, they're at least starting to see some type of a return. We got a long way to go, far from finished products, but you don't see 17 of 18 within 2 draft classes on an initial 53.
Sometimes, you get a not majority, but some of those guys, the numbers, like those guys aren't even in the league. That happens, but it just goes to show me, like, Joe Schoen knows what he's doing, man. Like, he's been scouting for so long. He's been on the road so long. Like, when he stepped into the GM role, like it was like he was prepared for this role because he's been put through the fire, and he's been prodded and he's been tested and he's a proven commodity already. And he's like a new GM, right? Like he hasn't had that much experience at that position because he's done the groundwork for so long. He understands what type of players is going to fit into this culture. And him and Daboll combined together, they've established something that haven't been here in a long time, man, and that's culture. And the Giants culture, when I got here, they talk about the history. They talk about all the old players. And then, of course, once a Giant, always a Giant, you see the old players coming in, and that is the culture that's been established here. And I don't think that was here for like 6 or 7 years, ever since basically Coughlin left. And they've established that. And they're bringing in high character guys. They're hitting on the drafts. They're bringing in great free agent signings, right? Joe Schoen is doing a tremendous job right now. But now this is where his job starts to slow down a little bit. And now everything that he's been working on, all the players, all the rosters, keeping Kafka in-house, keeping Wink Martindale in-house. Now it's going to be, okay, guys, I've done my work. Now it's time to get to work, right? Because last season, as soon as the season was over, it was Joe Schoen's time to shine. And I think he knocked it out the park. Now it's time to actually see what he's been doing for the last 2 years and see if it has any type of impact. Not any type of impact. Let's see the impact it has on this Giants organization.
You present the coaching staff with the assets. Now they have to mold them into productive players. And we did see a bit of that last season, especially the guys that came in around this time, right, through the waiver claims, through free agency. So that is encouraging as well. One other thing that I wanted to point out, and it was a great point on your part about preparing for week 1. I was talking with Bill Polian, Hall of Fame executive, on Sirius XM yesterday. We were doing a show together, and he was going into the logic of front office executives and what the priorities are on the initial 53, the first 53. And he says, you'd be surprised. Most of the conversations, at least at this point, are geared towards, let's get through week 1. Let's make sure we have everybody at our disposal because, as you know, JC, there's vested veterans who have at least 4 years in the league. If they're on the roster week 1, they get guaranteed money.
For us,
so usually they don't get brought back into the mix until, you're smiling because the Monday after the first week of the regular season. So that's why they don't get so caught up in, if we lose a vested veteran, what does it mean? All right, we'll bring him back for the start of week 2. So I thought that was interesting. That was exactly what you were getting into in terms of preparing these younger corners.
Yeah, and look, they're going to do everything they can. I think we saw from how they handled the Saquon Barkley situation with Joe Schoen, how they handled that with leveraging Saquon Barkley's contract basically with this franchise tag. And then at the end, it was like, we're not going to just be straight business and we have the leverage, we're going to do that. No, they made amends. And they figured out how to get Saquon Barkley here and make Saquon Barkley happy when the Giants had all the leverage and they didn't need to do that.
Sure.
You know? So I think by seeing that, it was like, okay, not only are they going to do what's best for the team and what's best for business, but they're going to take care of their guys, right? They're going to do everything possible to do and get every guy in here they need to get to play every guy. They're going to do all the loopholes, the finesses. They're going to do all of that to get a good product out there, you know? And, like, I can't tip my hat off enough to Joe Schoen, man. He's just, like, he's really batting 1,000, bro. Like, I think we talked about this last year. It was like, I'm waiting for this guy to mess up. You know, I'm waiting for him to mess up because he's done such a good job. And, you know, usually it's like you got good players and then upstairs is not working correctly, right? Or your upstairs is working correctly and you don't really got good players. Or you got good players, you got upstairs, right, but the coaches, something wrong with the coaches, right? I think the Giants right now have moved into that category of this is a really good organization from the top down. And your players are good, right? Graham Cano, he hit 2 55-yard plus field goals in his last game. So the Giants are checking all the boxes, bro, and I'm so excited. Like, and you know what I hate too, Lance? I hate that I got to predict how good a team's going to be in, like, March, right, before the draft. Like, I want to see – let me predict how good a team is going to be right before the first game. Let me do that, right?
Patience,
because
yes.
This team looks a lot different than it did 2 months ago. You know,
and they're going to look differently 3-4 weeks from now, too.
Exactly.
After they have a number of games under
You
their
know,
belt.
and the way they're looking right now, like the way they're going to be on offense, they're going to be able to move and do so many different things with Waller and Bellinger being those 2 tight ends, and then all the receivers that they added, and then Gray coming in as a rookie, showing that he can return kicks and he can be a valuable alternative to Breida and Saquon Barkley, and then all of the defensive guys that they have in. You got, you know, top picks like Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, a monster in the middle of Dexter Lawrence, a veteran in the middle of Leonard Williams, a whole bunch of young corners and safeties that can play ball, hungry safeties in Pinnock and Dane Belton that get their hands on the ball. Like, bro, like, this is it. Like, this is the team that we've been waiting for the Giants to put together. And I think they're still going to get better because Joe Schoen is still making moves. And like you said, those veterans get paid for the whole season on week 1 if they're active. So if some guys aren't on rosters week 1, expect some guys to get signed week 2.
Oh, absolutely.
Because that's business. That's the leverage. That's the finesse. That's the loophole. that Joe Schoen, he can't. For me, he can't surprise me anymore. He can't surprise me. He's doing such a good job and bringing and doing everything that he possibly can to get the talent on the team. Not only get the talent, but get the guys that fit the culture into this locker room.
Well, thankfully, that Bills pipeline is alive and well.
Yes, it is.
Boy, they are not hesitating
Just
turning
send
back.
them on over. Send them on
Buffalo
over.
Bills. The volume of former players, Brandon Beane and Joe Schoen, you know, have still a very strong relationship because that phone line is very, very strong. And there are tie-ins going back and forth between both of these organizations. A few reminders before we open up the phone lines. Giants Huddle Podcast, you can check that out on your favorite podcast platform, or you go to giants.com/podcast. Run or walk with Giants legends. The Giants Foundation will host a 5K race and kids run presented by Quest on Sunday, October 8th. 9 a.m. Eastern, MetLife Stadium. Net proceeds will benefit the Giants Foundation. All participants will receive a commemorative T-shirt after the race. Stay for a post-race festival with appearances by Giants legends and a live DJ. Register now at giants.com/5K. Giants fans, you can take your fandom to the next level with a season ticket membership. Stay connected to the club all year round, not just on game days. Memberships are now available for the 2023 season. To learn more about all the exclusive member benefits, visit giants.com/tickets. Limited inventory is available. And you can also get single game tickets. They're on sale now. Don't miss the Giants at MetLife Stadium this season. Visit giants.com/tickets to secure your seat. The Giants' official connected TV streaming app, Giants TV. It brings you original video content and game highlights on demand and direct to Big Blue fans. Giants TV, it's free. It's on Apple TV, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, as well as the Giants mobile app. All right, let's open up the phone lines as we move along here on Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live. Dan is in the Poconos. He gets us started here on BBKL. What's happening, Dan? Welcome to the program. All right, we lost Dan. Dan is a man of very few words. Let's see if we can get better as we move along here. See, we're still in the experimental phase as we get ready for the start of the season. Kevin is in West Palm Beach, and we're anticipating he may have a few more words to add to the conversation. Kevin, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Lance. I appreciate it. So look, I probably am beating a little bit of a dead horse here. I know you guys are really kind of bringing up the defense today. There's two things that have been on my mind every week as I've listened to this show. One being the obvious offensive line depth. But I know my opinion is I'm very, very nervous about, if anybody goes down on this line, what it's going to look like. It doesn't bother me that we might be, shifting people in and out at guard and trying different things. I think it worked okay enough for us last year. And, Barkley obviously was able to take off. But I guess I would ask both of you, what do you think is the position or the part of the team, whether it's offense or defense, that you have the most skepticism at if we do have players go down, where you would be nervous that the scheme might fall apart, or we might have to really start trying to trade for somebody quickly to be able to patch a hole?
And it's a fair question. And Kevin, I'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. Well, we've been asked this even earlier in the offseason, which just goes to show you, JC, probably our answers would change. But to me, it starts on the offensive line. And it's not to say that there's overwhelming concern, but you have some movable parts on the interior, and that's where, to me, the biggest test is going to come. You have a rookie center who's playing next to two new guards. You can tell me all you want about Mark Lewinsky and Ben Bredesen have been here, but they have not played next to John Michael Schmitz.
Right.
And left guard was a revolving door last season.
Yes.
So even from Andrew Thomas's perspective, right, he wasn't next to Ben Bredesen the entire season. And you're going up against DeMarcus Lawrence and Micah Parsons and Dorrance Armstrong and Mozzie Smith, who they drafted. We know the Cowboys love to stunt. They're a very aggressive defense. We're going to learn a lot about the interior of the Giants' offensive line out of the gates. But if that unit, forget injuries, to the caller's point, even if that unit as is has its ups and downs. So I'm going to do your little snake, the navigating. I like that. All right, I'm going to put a little, mojo into that here. That could present some challenges here moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And, when you talk about offensive line play, it's like the hand, right? These guys have to be able to have continuity, chemistry, and all that. It's with reps and more reps. And, you can't just plug and play O-linemen, I feel like you could do other positions, right? Because everybody has to be on the same page. And they have their own terminology. They're in their own world. The O-line in this building here, they're their own little family, right? And when you have a revolving door at left guard, when you have guys that are new like John Michael Schmitz, expect some growing pains, right? And hopefully it's not too long. Hopefully it doesn't last long. Hopefully they done figured it out because, we watched last year the Giants have a great first two games of the season, and then basically the offensive line got exposed against Dallas, right? We got Dallas week 1 now. So the Giants need to be prepared, especially along the offensive line, with that defensive front that they're going to see when Dallas comes in town. And then, look, a lot of teams now throughout the league, they understand that the most valuable position in the NFL is quarterback. So they're going to get people that's going to affect the quarterback. So who is that? That's pass rushers. Not only just on the outside, the edge rushers, the outside linebackers, the stand-up DNs, the DNs, but also the interior linemen, right? So you have to be intact. You have to be tight. And when he talked about injuries, my first thought was O-line. Because if somebody goes down, if Andrew Thomas goes down, knock on wood, it's going to be this is going to be some issues for sure, and there's going to be a whole bunch of teams just licking their chops. So yes, I understand what your point was. Was it Kevin the caller was?
Correct. Yep.
I understand your point, and then my second position group will probably be defensive back. Right?
I'm with you.
And the rookies, maybe if one of them go down, but if Adoree goes down, the Giants are going to be in some serious issues because there's nobody else like Adoree on the team. There's nobody that has that much experience that can play and match up against the guys that he can match up against. And the Giants will have some struggles. And yeah, I'm talking about specific players, like if Saquon or if Daniel Jones, the top tier players. But I'm talking about position groups. You look at that offensive line. One of those guys go down, or like you said, they don't get it figured out early in the season, it's going to be a struggle for the Giants the entire year.
Yeah, and when you dig yourself an early hole, it's not easy to climb out of that, as we've seen with teams. Look at the Lions last year, 1-6. They went 8-2 in the second half, but they still missed the playoffs ultimately. And I'm with you with respect to, I'd hone probably in on corner, maybe more so than safety, JC.
Yep.
I think safety, they're in a position where you have a little bit more substance, and you have some guys that are interchangeable who could play corner and safety, but you're relying on Hawkins and Banks on the front line.
Yes.
So just think about, who's behind those guys,
behind them,
right? The Cordell Flotts of the world, he didn't get a lot of experience last year because he was in and out of the lineup. And Darnay Holmes, he's also been in and out of the lineup. So there's not overwhelming experience, I would point to, behind those two guys in the event they get hurt or they're banged up at some point in this season. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We check in with Cameron in Phoenix here on BBKL. What's happening, Cameron? What do you got for us?
Hey, good morning, fellas. How you doing?
Good morning to you. We're doing well. What's on your mind?
First off, I just want to say thank you to Jonathan for your time in New York and inspiring another young Hispanic man to play some football. Thank you.
No doubt, man. Appreciate you.
My point today was the more I've seen this Giants offense throughout the offseason and the pieces we bring in and keep, I can't help but to look at us as like a mini Chiefs or a Chiefs Junior, if you will, coming up for this next season, especially with Kafka at the helm. And correct me if I'm wrong, did he not come from Kansas City?
He did. Yep.
So, I mean, in my head, I'm looking at the tight end. We've got that covered. I don't think Kansas City really has any big-name receivers or anything like that, which we're kind of in the same boat. So I see a way that we can really kind of make the offense work and kind of look like a Chiefs Junior and really improve this season.
Well, I think there's definitely similarities, Kelsey to Waller. I think you're going to have – the comparison is the offense is going to be built around a tight end as the primary weapon, and you have fast – smaller receivers around the tight end. So that's where I think the comparison, Cameron, is. I wouldn't get so ahead of ourselves. I mean, I know you mentioned the Chiefs may not have household names. You may not put them on your fantasy team, but they did have Tyreek Hill for quite some time with Travis Kelce. And last I checked, he was a proven commodity. McCole Hardman was also a notable player who's now with the Jets. So maybe now they have a lot of movable parts and guys that have been hurt, such as a Kadarius Toney and some of the young guys, Sky Moore. But there was a period of time where you did have some household names at receiver in addition to Travis Kelce.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also, if you look at the defense as well, you got a Chris Jones over there, and we got our Dexter Lawrence over here, you know.
Big guys in the middle.
But
yeah.
Let's be real about this. There's only one Patrick Mahomes. He's arguably one of the greatest players to ever play the sport, in the game, and you can't really replicate that. Like, I watched him beat the Eagles by himself in the second half of the Super Bowl last year, right? Like, the guy's incredible. There's nobody like him. There's nobody you can compare to him. And even Andy Reid and his track record and his body of work,
Yeah.
So that is what sets, I think, the Chiefs apart from anybody
they have a track
else
record. Yeah.
in the NFL.
Huge difference.
When you keep that head coach and that quarterback combo, and there's lightning in a bottle for them over there, but good thing we don't got to worry about them, this year. We may have to see them in February if we're still playing football.
Well, I thought you were going to take it easy with the predictions.
Well,
here.
I'm saying we don't have to worry about them, but if we do, it'll be one time.
That's true.
And it'll be in February.
That is factually accurate. We will leave it at that.
Just saying.
No lies detected in terms of your calendar projection.
And then make sure you call back and we'll have this conversation again.
Yeah, we'll do a whole synopsis on the Chiefs versus the Giants,
Absolutely.
I can assure you. Yeah. Go ahead, Cameron.
Look, I'll never call Daniel Jones Patrick Mahomes, at least not yet. But
Sure.
I think he doesn't get the respect he deserves, and I think he's a lot better than people are saying.
Well, I think we're going to learn a lot with respect to that, and appreciate the phone call, Cameron, because you have additional weapons around him this season, and you could say Patrick Mahomes had a lot of weapons around him, and does that help take the quarterback to the next level? So if you're of that mindset,
it should.
well, yes, by default it should. Mm-hmm. But you know what? We've also seen examples where everything looks great on paper, and it doesn't translate. So it's fair to right now have some questions, but also feel optimistic at the same time.
I think that's a good word to use, optimistic, because what we're seeing from Daniel Jones right now, and I feel like how he's kind of emerged as the guy, as the leader for the whole franchise, not just, I'm the quarterback for the New York Giants. No, I'm the guy. That's me. I'm running this team, and he's taking it, and he's had a great preseason. He has, that one drive, that's all I needed to see. That's all I needed to see against the Panthers. I saw that. I was like, okay. And me and Schmelk actually talked right before the game. It was like, how much we think the players are going to play, and we both said was like, if they go down the field with like a 10-play drive and they score a touchdown, the starters are out. That's exactly what they did. The only thing that surprised me, though, Lance, it was 10 pass plays. That's what surprised me. But that was to showcase Daniel Jones and to open up the offense and see the weapens that they have. And
get used to those new weapons, too.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And you know what? Well, people, they're so excited for like Darren Waller and Jalen Hyde and how explosive this offense is going to be, how versatile it's going to be. You know what player I'm excited for that's going to create so much versatility for the offense? Daniel Bellinger. He's going to be the only guy that can line up at positions that other people can't line up at. right? Because I think Paris Campbell, Wan'Dale Robinson, they can line up at running back. They're going to be split out wide.
You can use them out of the backfield.
Right? They're going to be split out wide, but they're not going to be in line, and they're not going to be in the backfield at fullback. You know who's going to line up in all those positions? Daniel Bellinger. He's going to be the one that really opens up this offense. Because if you go out in 12 personnel, which is 2 wide receivers, 2 tight ends on the line of scrimmage, or not, you got 2 tight ends in the game with Waller and Bellinger there. You can make that look like 10 personnel. They all split out. You can put Bellinger in the backfield at fullback, Waller at tight end. That's 21 personnel. So you got to be able to match up against the Giants' 2 tight end sets with everything you have. You got to be able to put linebackers against them. You got to be able to line up DBs against them. And you have to have a base set to match up against anything that the Giants do. Do you know how hard that's going to be? That's going to be very difficult for defenses to do. And that's because not just Waller, because of Daniel Bellinger.
Well, and also the 2 of them are threats in the passing game.
That's what I'm saying.
Right,
you have can sometimes split them out, both of them.
Because you have tight ends on the field and they're only blockers. They're not a threat.
That's why I'm telling you, Daniel Bellinger, his presence here, and he's bigger, stronger, he's more developed. He has a plate like the Terminator in his face now. Like, I'm expecting him to have a great year because of Waller, because of Hyatt, and because of the versatility that he brings to the offense.
Yeah, red beam comes out of his eye.
I saw it.
Yeah, it's like Cyclops. Yeah, he's going to be part of the Marvel superheroes, I'm told. Let's head back to the phone lines. Andrew's in Virginia, joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Andrew?
Hey, guys. So I just wanted to let you guys know Paul Latino on the top 10 NFL most devastating games. He was like a flash from the past. But what are the penalties the umpires are going to look at this year? I know a few times like they focused certain penalties certain years. Like one time it was like the kickoff infraction, and so I don't know if they have told the teams yet like what penalties they're going to focus on this year. You guys heard that? And if not, what do you think they might do?
All right, Andrew, appreciate the phone call.
Preseason, what I've seen, they're really going to be paying attention to how the guys touch the quarterbacks. Not even hit. First of all, you can't hit quarterbacks no more. That's number one. I'm talking about touching quarterbacks. You can't even touch them anymore.
No, they're going to throw a flag immediately. And that's been emphasized previously.
It's been going, in previous years. But, like, man, I mean, like, bro, they're still on the football team. They're still part of the game, right? And from what I've seen this preseason, just the Giants games, I haven't really watched any other really teams in the preseason, but from just the Giants games, it looked like the emphasis is going to be protecting the quarterbacks even more.
Yeah, well, we saw the Giants players get penalized, right? Baldonado, Dexter Lawrence.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if you have your hands in the vicinity of the quarterback and you don't put them immediately down and you make contact, it's going to be an automatic flag because the ref doesn't have the ability in slow motion to process whether or not there was too much or too less velocity with your hand.
Yep.
It's bang, bang. So that's going to happen.
And then usually when they do stuff like that in the preseason, and they may do it on plays that's not really there. Like, maybe it did, maybe it didn't happen, but because it was close, we're going to,
they're going to give the benefit of the doubt.
Anyway,
100%
right?
to the quarterback.
And then that has emphasis during the season. So it's like, all right, guys, that's a great question because it's like now, what is the referees focus on this year? They're going to be focused on that. At least that's from what I've seen. I don't have no other answers or no other way that they're looking at, but that's something I feel like they're definitely focusing on.
Normally before the season, we hear some stories or reports about certain elements. I have not heard anything specifically. I mean, we're going based on what we saw in the preseason.
Right.
And it definitely has been an emphasis to that.
Wasn't pass interference a big one
Pass
last
interference,
couple of years?
correct. That was, well, remember, they ultimately then allowed replay in that mix, and that was a disaster for 1 year, and thank goodness they removed that. So, yeah, we've seen different years, different emphasis points, but I don't think there's anything in particular. I just think they're going to obviously be aware of the changes to the kickoff with new rules in place. So that's going to be something to obviously monitor with respect to getting automatically at the 25-yard line. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. We got Cliff in New York joining us here on Big Blue Kickoff Live. What's happening, Cliff?
Hey, guys. Thanks for a great show as usual.
Thanks for tuning in.
Yes, sir. I want to ask Jonathan about a particular player that he played against. But before I do that, I want to just address the subject of
So you must be naming a guy from the 1950s then, if that's the case. But yeah, go ahead, Cliff. Yeah. So, yeah.
No such luck. No such luck. He's still a formidable adversary. So anyway, I'll let the suspense build.
Oh, boy, is it ever. Yes.
Yeah, I could see that. You're falling off your chair.
Overwhelming, yes.
Yes. I'm interested in where I mean, there's a lot to be excited about. Obviously, there's a lot to really be reasonably optimistic about going really even further than last year, and very cautiously, of course, feeling that way. But still, it's not pie in the sky by any means. And I love the way the roster is shaping up. I'm still a fan of Gettleman as a player personnel guy. And 19 of his guys are still on the 53. I'm proud to point out. And 20 if you count Aaron Robinson. So that's just as many as the 18 that you just pointed out that Joe Shane drafted. So recently on a recent show, I think it was John that said, keep in mind we're still only in year 2. Year 2 has built tremendously on the previous 4 years. And especially with the long-term signings that we've done and the big shot players. What I'm trying to get at is with where are we, really as a team, and especially the individual player development, because the player I wanted to ask Jonathan about was Jason Kelsey, because I assume Jonathan saw him for several years. Mm-hmm. And my Eagles fan friend says he became an All-Pro in his 5th year. And his first year was 2011. So I'm asking about that because when we were talking about Bredesen the other day, people said, well, we don't think he's going to be an All-Pro, but I just wonder if Kelsey looked anything like what he became. And also what we see in the guys that are on the roster right now as development candidates and who has a ceiling and who doesn't and that kind of thing. That's what I was looking for.
All right, well, we'll let you go on that note. Appreciate the phone call. With respect to Kelsey, as I bring up his data, just to give specifics, he made the Pro Bowl in his 4th year in 2014, and he was a starter right from the beginning. Yep. Okay, and that's important to note because I was here when Cliff brought up the point about Ben Bredesen, that maybe the ceiling hasn't been reached yet and there's still more room. But, Bredesen was not a starter from day 1, too. You have to understand. He was brought in as a complimentary offensive lineman and received opportunities with the Giants. So Kelsey, right out of the gates, they were starting to mold him, build the foundation, and then he missed a good portion of his 2nd year in 2012 due to injury. So that's another reason why I would argue it took till year 4 for him to obviously come to fruition. Those are a little bit different versus what Bredesen's path was here.
Yeah, absolutely. And also he had help. The Philadelphia Eagles offensive line, for me, I remember the last 7-8 years, they've been pretty solid, Yeah. Back in, I guess, 8-9 years ago, I guess when he was a rookie, you had Jason Peters. He was a Pro Bowl tackle. When you have guys like that, that'll help you out a little bit more, know. And I think with Andrew Thomas being how I think he's going to, kind of transition over from last year to this year, and then Evan Neal's progress as well, that's just going to help cement the offensive line in general. So I definitely, if Bredesen is going to be anything close to what Kelsey has done in his body of work, then it's going to be this year. Because you got 2 tackles on the outside. You got a very talented young center, I think, who understands how to play the game, how to play that position at a very high level. And then I think if Bredesen is going to be the guy that we possibly think he can be, it will show up this year. It has to. Because this is going to be his first year really playing, not rotating in and out. He's going to be the guy. So if he is the guy, we're going to see it this year.
I think you bring up an excellent point about the makeup of the Eagles' offensive line, because you know this from being in position rooms and how if you're a young guy and you're a sponge, you can learn a lot. I want to read you through. This is the 2013 Eagles offensive line, to your point. Jason Peters at left tackle. He was an All-Pro that year, first team. Evan Mathis, left guard, All-Pro. Both of those guys, okay, this is Jason Kelsey. This is year 3 for him. Peters is on year 9. Mathis is on year 8. Yep. Then we go to the right side of the line. Todd Herremans, 8th year in the NFL, solid, polished veteran. And Lane Johnson was the only rookie, and we saw what Lane has turned into. You think that's a coincidence? Because he was around the same guys.
But that's what I'm saying. That position, it's a hand, and all of those guys, they work together. I don't think you can have a stalwart tackle and have decent or not so great players on the other positions and have a good offensive line. It doesn't work that way. Like look at Joe Thomas, right? Joe Thomas for the Browns.
Sure.
For so long, he was a stalwart, right? Until they put other pieces around them, the Browns weren't a good offense, right? And then they put other pieces around them, and they were able to run the ball effectively for years and years and years, but they never could actually figure out. That's a whole nother story in itself.
Yes,
but
well,
I was just using that for an
Yeah.
example to say, just because you have a tremendous player, one tremendous player that doesn't do anything else for you need more players than just one guy, because that is a collective unit. And if you have multiple players that are good, all pro, all caliber, all high potential players, then that always increases your chances, Bredesen, in this case, your chances of being that guy, you being a Pro Bowl type of player. And then, of course, you can protect the quarterback. You can, put guys and move people off the line of scrimmage. And then that also has to do with how good your team is, right? Because if you're pass blocking because you're playing from behind the entire game, that's not a position that you want to be in as an offensive lineman with all these talented pass rushers, right? But if you're leaning on guys and you're ahead or at least in the game where you can run the ball effectively and efficiently throughout the game, that's going to help you out too. So it's just so many different things that go into it. But I think, number one, who are the guys around him? Number two, is this a coherent offense? And I think those boxes are checked off right now.
I mean, think about it. Todd Herremans, Evan Mathis, Jason Peters, they have double the amount of experience at that point in Kelsey's career than Andrew Thomas.
Right.
So even though Andrew Thomas has developed into a staple, he's still relatively young, right? Mm-hmm. In the big picture of things. And Bredesen hasn't been in the league very long. Evan Neal hasn't even finished a rookie year. Right. If you add up all the games he's played, he has to have a few games to finish that up. Mark Lewinsky, I'll give you that. He's the solid veteran. But once again, you're not talking about an all-pro or a Pro Bowl-esque type of player. So the dynamic's very different around Jason Kelsey in comparison to Ben Bredesen, to answer the last caller's question. Fair point, but context matters in this dialogue. All right, let's head back to the phone lines. Len is in Maryland, joining us here on BBKL. What's happening, Len?
Hey, guys. How you doing?
What up, Len?
Yeah, good. Just on the last point you were making, Lance, and I think you were right on. If the majority of your team is in the 4 to 8 year category of veterans, you're really in pretty good shape. And if the Giants aren't there now, they are getting there. The core of this team is falling into that 4 to 8 year range, and I always think that's a positive if you get people in that range. The final 53, it's what it is. I thought they did a pretty good job. I don't have any complaints about anybody. Maybe, if pushed, they might say, well, I don't understand why we kept Lemieux and cut Phillips. But by and large, of the 100 guys that we saw in training camp over the course of the 5 weeks, and geez, we were bringing in guys the last 3 to 4 days. I mean, Simmons came in and probably bumped Beavers, and Basham came in and probably bumped Fox. So I think for who we are, we got the right 53. I know people want to make a judgment about how bad the backup offensive linemen are, but you could take the best swing tackle in the NFL. I don't know who that is, but let's just assume we have this guy who's known as the best swing tackle in the NFL, and put him on the Giants, and Andrew Thomas goes down, God forbid, there's a huge drop-off.
Yep.
I don't care how good you are. If Thomas gets hurt, there's just a huge drop-off. He's probably 1, 2, or 3 in terms of who we can, at least afford to, lose. I don't want to disagree with the previous caller. He was making a very good point about how great it is to have all these Giants draft picks on it. I didn't have quite as many as he had, but I did have a lot from the Gettleman regime, and we got to give Dave credit for that. But wow, 30, 35 draft picks that our guys have picked are that's really pretty good. No first year undrafted free agents
made the roster. Yeah.
That's all 7 draft picks that we talked about. And I don't know if this count is right, but I think this is very telling. Only 15 new players to this roster.
Well, 15 based
before.
on new, meaning compared to last season, meaning weren't on the roster last season?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, 15. And, I mean, last year was like 27, and the year before was like 29. So, I mean, the stability is there. And, again, that's probably a byproduct of all of your draft picks making the roster.
Well, and that's how you build up to 4 to 8 years of experience. It takes time. You don't get all that experience overnight.
There you go.
Yeah, I mean, I'll throw another number your way. I have, this is just from the initial 53 from last year to this year. 32 players that made the initial 53 this year were on the 2022 initial 53. So that also says a lot, too. I mean, that's a pretty nice number. Yeah.
It sure does. It sure does. And it shows how, you know, in the Shane era, and maybe with as many picks as there are in the, you know, also from the Gettleman era, I mean, you look at your scouts and you say, find your good players, and the scout comes and says, this guy's good, and you hang on to him for a while. I mean, you trust your scouts.
Sure.
You know, you can't give up on play. I mean, McKeithen, you know, a lot of people wanted to see him get cut, but geez, a fifth-round pick.
Who barely played. I mean, he didn't even play at all last season. So,
I mean,
there's no sample size.
Yeah, I think they see McKeithen, if Glowinski comes back for his third year next year, and I don't want to get too far ahead here, but you know, I think they see McKeithen as a possible right guard next year, if Glow isn't back.
Yeah. Well, I do think they look at him more as a guard than a tackle, based on that.
Yes.
I don't think there's any doubt about that.
Oh, yeah,
even though he does have versatility based on his North Carolina days.
Yeah. I think they see him as that right guard replacement, you know, somewhere down the line. But I guess my final point, just in summary from what I'm saying, and thank you for letting me rant on here. I think we're in good shape. Geez, you know, if we lose the quarterback, we lose Barkley, we lose Andrew Thomas. You know, it's going to be tough to overcome. But by and large, this is the best roster we've had in a long time.
Well,
you know,
absolutely.
Can't wait for that Cowboys game. I think it'll show up in that Cowboys game.
Well, and that will be the first test, Landon. Appreciate the phone call. Thanks for giving us a ring. You're not going to know for sure until we actually play meaningful games.
Yep.
Right now, it's still the paper test. But based on the numbers we're throwing out, the rookies, the guys that were on the initial 53, what you are seeing is a core being developed.
Yep.
Because it's never good, and you could shed more light on this than anybody, JC. It's never good when, within the span of 1 year, that your roster gets turned around and 50% of the guys are brand new. I mean, how are you supposed to be able to lean on what you worked on molding the previous season? It's very difficult to do that. And the Giants, they've been through those years where the way the roster looked 1 year, completely different, unrecognizable the following year.
Yeah.
Now it's a little bit recognizable based on what happened last season.
And I think you can have optimism to think that the Giants, they know what they have. They have something good here. Like, they're good players here. It's a good batch of guys here, right? I think the turnover happens when they don't have the quality guys that they feel like they need, you know, and you keep, I think you're going to just keep seeing little pieces add on to this roster, you know, as time goes on, right? Cole Beasley, we expect him to play this year for the New York Giants, right? I definitely expect Cole Beasley to play this year. And Joe Shane, Dayball, Kafka, Wink Martindale, like keeping the two offensive and defensive coordinators in-house to start was huge, because I think these guys, they see the potential here on this roster, on this team, and everything they're doing is showing that, all right, the nucleus that was built in 2022 is very, very solid, and the foundation is very, very solid. So yes, some moving parts here and there, but the foundation is there, right? The quarterback is there, the left tackle is there, the D tackle is there, right? Let's just continue to build on top of that solid foundation that they established in 2022 and let it ride out, and to just keep adding pieces to this foundation to hopefully one day be a Super Bowl contender.
Well, and that goes back to the makeup of the NFC East. When we've been having these conversations about the Cowboys and the Eagles versus the Giants, the major difference is, well, why has there been more consistency over here, as I point to the left as opposed to the right where the Giants are? It's because Dallas and Philadelphia are ahead of the curve in terms of that core.
Yep.
And the coaching staff, too, that has been together, whether it be Mike McCarthy or Dan Quinn on the defensive side of the ball. I know Philly has had some changes.
Little turnover, yeah.
Okay, because their coordinators left to become head coaches, but they promoted their QB coach to be OC. Their defensive coordinator is new, but all the guys up front and some of the guys they drafted a year prior to get them ready to start, there's been more of a track record to turn to those factors, and that's why I think it's been reflected in the standings. The Giants now, you're looking at year 2. So can you sustain what the Eagles and the Cowboys have done? That's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
And if that gets answered, that's even more encouraging here moving forward.
Yeah, and I expect all teams to improve, but everybody improves on paper at this time of the year. It's up to what product they put out there, and then at the end of the season, when you look back, how much did attrition play a role into how your roster looks at the end of the year? Is your roster similar to what it looked like at the end of the year and at the beginning? Nobody's roster is the same at the end of the year as it is at the beginning. It just never like that. But let's see if the Giants can go ahead and limit the amount of injuries this year, which is, I mean, I don't even know how that's even possible to do, but I know ACLs.
Unless you have a magic potion or something.
ACLs have been like double the amount for the Giants for the league average. The Giants had 11 ACL injuries the last couple of years. Hopefully that's not a problem anymore, because you lose a guy from ACL, Sterling Shepard, Wandale was ACL.
Wandale Robinson, yep.
Beavers, like Sterling, of course, he's a guy that we know what Sterling is. Wandale, we don't really know what Wandale is. We've seen glimpses of him.
Flashes, against the Lions.
Beavers, you don't know how the potential that he has.
Didn't play one regular season game.
Flashes. So if the Giants can limit the injuries, the amount of major injuries like that, and this is a thing that I spoke about last year, they have to figure out what's going on. Because I'm not a doctor or anything like that, but 11 ACLs in 2 years, that's a lot. And I Googled and I looked around.
Oh, so you're trying to be a doctor that apparently.
No, I'm just trying to see, like, is that normal? Like, is that, and it's not. It's almost double. It's almost double the next team. Like, that's a lot. So what I'm saying is that the Giants have a solid roster now, and it looks great. But if the Giants can beat that war of attrition and win that war of attrition this year and kind of stay relatively intact and keep their key guys healthy, then the Giants are going to be forced to reckon with come December.
I hope you're happy. You're now giving the conspiracy theorists out there so much more substance with you and your homework into double the amount of ACLs.
Lance,
than
let me
any
tell
other
you something too.
Yes.
When I played the game and I was hurt all the time, I was like, why am I always hurt? Like, I was trying to figure out, like, what was going on with me personally. Like, am I doing something? I get enough sleep? Am I seeing the trainers enough? Am I taking enough vitamins? Like, I literally, like, that was
saying
the thing
your prayers.
Everything, bro. Like, because that's the thing. Like, it's not like, is he good enough to play? It's not, is he smart enough? Most guys are out the league because they get hurt. They get hurt, whether it's they can't come back or they get hurt where they're just done or they mentally said, I'm done. And for me, it was like all those things. For me, I retired and I feel like I was playing my best football, right? So injuries for me has always been like, how can we navigate around that, And some of the most talented guys in the league, like Odell, Saquon, those guys have been on the injury log. I think injuries have stunted their growth, right? Odell, when I was here, we played against Tampa down in Tampa, and I was in Tampa like 2 years before. I was looking at DBs like, what y'all playing this for 13? Because if y'all got to play him, he about to kill y'all boys, And injuries slowed Odell down. Like he was about to be the greatest receiver ever, and he's still very, very good, but he's not taking 90-yard slants to the crib anymore.
No, completely different game.
And then Saquon, his injuries probably prevented him from getting a long-term contract. So it just sucks, and it's a part of the game. But if the Giants can navigate through that mystery of injuries, figure out how to kind of fight that war of attrition throughout the year, the Giants are going to have a good year this year.
Well, with that being said, that is going to wrap up Thursday's edition of Big Blue Kickoff Live, part of the Giants platforms everywhere and Giants.com/podcast. We're going to have a special edition, tomorrow's Big Blue Kickoff Live, a taped edition, a full NFL preview. Myself, John Schmelk, Paul Dottino, so you can go to Giants.com to check that out, as that will be posted right around, I'm assuming, 11 a.m. Eastern, the normal start time. So that is already packaged and ready to go for your consumption as we move forward here on BBKL. For Jonathan Casillas, I'm Lance Medow. Stay locked to Giants.com for all the latest. Enjoy Labor Day, and we will speak to you on Monday. We'll be back live at 12:30 p.m. Eastern as we gear up for Week 1 Sunday Night Football, Cowboys-Giants. Stay tuned for all of that, and have a good one.